Now for a while I've been debating about how I would make this video. Would I fill it full of facts, graphics, analytics, and everything else relating to the Winnipeg Jets, the offseason moves and whatnot, going into the season, all the expectations, basing it all off analytics and moves and all that stuff. But when it comes down to it, I really can't do that, because if you compare where I was last year in my last game reaction to last season, where the Winnipeg Jets were eliminated and swept by the Edmonton Oilers in Game 4, I was furious, and for good reason. I feel like almost every single one of us as a collective fan group was furious. The team played horrible hockey, it was pathetic to watch, and I was enraged. I was angry. After such a successful, good performance in the first round where they were able to sweep the Edmonton Oilers, to come in and play that type of pathetic hockey, it was just sad to watch, and I wanted Paul Maurice to be fired. I wanted a lot of things to be done with the organization. I wanted Blake Wheeler to be stripped to the sea potentially. I wanted him to be moved down from that top six. I wanted to see something to be shuffled. Something had to be done about youth being played into that lineup. Something had to be done about acquiring defensemen to strengthen the blue line. All of these variables going into the offseason, behind a really bad end to a season where it was kind of a weird one, because you could argue that the Jets had a pretty okay season, and for the most part, you wouldn't be wrong. You know, the Jets weren't terrible. They made the playoffs. They went to the second round. That's not a terrible season. But when you look at everything as a collective, and I share my thoughts every game and talk about the Jets constantly, you guys know that the NHL season is full of ups and downs. And the Winnipeg Jets really did have an up and down season playing in that North Division last year. Especially at the end of the season, they struggled. There was a lot of question marks with the Jets last season, and there were a lot of question marks going into the playoffs. And when you come into this season, I feel like there aren't that many question marks about this team anymore. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because when I still look at this team, there are still some problems I have with this team. That doesn't mean that I'm not excited as all hell and think that this is a very good team that could potentially make it to the Stanley Cup final, and I genuinely mean that, and I will explain why I feel that way. But like I said, this isn't going to be some analytical breakdown of the Winnipeg Jets coming to this season like you might have seen in other season previews posted by other content creators and, you know, sporting outlets across the social medias and just on television. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you might have seen breaking down the Winnipeg Jets, this is going to be a little bit more different of a take, because as a fan, a super fan who watches everything about this team, who studies every move and really, you know, looks into how this team is built and coached and utilized with their players, I think this is one of the best Winnipeg Jet rosters we've seen in a long time, and I'll explain why I feel this way. And obviously there are still some elements to this team that have question marks that make me nervous going into this season, even though I have all this faith in this current iteration of the Winnipeg Jets. And what it really comes down to, in my opinion, and I might get shit on by this, and I really don't care. If you guys disagree with me, please tell me in the comments why. Don't just take the easy route and say, oh, you're an idiot, because if anything, it just shows that you're the idiot. Explain why you disagree with me, show why in an articulate comment, so that we can talk about hockey. I think that's the best way for us to describe it, because in the end, we're all Jets fans. Doesn't matter if you disagree with one fan or another. When it comes down to it, we root for the same team, and that's all that matters. And I really do think that the Winnipeg Jets have a good chance on winning the Stanley Cup this season. They are a dark horse for it, for sure. They're not widely considered to be a top team competing for the Cup, I would say. Even though I would say they're within, I would personally say, the top 10 of the best teams in the NHL right now, with the talent, the forward core, the defensive core, and not to mention a perennial Vezina candidate in Connor Hellebuck. The banner's hanging right up there, right there. I can never point to it either way. He's already won. He's been nominated twice or 3 times. I believe it might even be 3 times he's been nominated and already won once. He's an awesome, fantastic goaltender, a top 5 player in the league, you could argue. As a goaltender, he's incredible. And when you have a team this good, with the forward core that deadly, a defense that has been revitalized with new talent in Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon, not to mention guys like Ville Heinola, Dylan Samberg, the list goes on, Declan Chisholm a few years out. There's so many young prospects that are in this system right now that are really interesting to learn about and see their development. Obviously, you know, I don't think that, you know, every single defenseman on the Winnipeg Jets is an amazing player. But that doesn't matter. I've stated this before in a lot of different videos that I don't think you necessarily need a legit number 1 top 5 defenseman in the NHL to win a Stanley Cup and have a good defensive core. In my opinion, one of the best consistent two-way defensive cores that you can build is full of two-way reliable defensemen. You don't need to have big names when every single guy there is reliable, can put up a decent amount of points, and you can trust with the puck in both ends of the ice. That's a very valuable skill to have, especially as a defenseman, and I think the Jets have a surplus of that, especially within their top 4 of their defensemen. Nate Schmidt, Brendan Dillon, Josh Morrissey, and Neil Pionk are very, very skilled defensemen in different ways of the ice. Nate Schmidt has a good shot. He's got good offensive insight. He can play on both sides. He plays everywhere really, really well. He's able to play the puck extremely well on his bad side, which is a very valuable skill to have, especially when you have to cover and have switches and, making up for pinching. It can be a very valuable skill to have a guy that's universally, dynamic on that blue line that can play any side and be effective. Brendan Dillon is the exact type of defenseman that Winnipeg Jets fans like myself have been screaming for the Jets to go after and get. He is a hard-hitting, good, reliable two-way defenseman who isn't going to put up a ton of points, but is a guy that you can trust on the back end. A guy that will play perfect with Neil Pionk, who is not the greatest defensive-minded defenseman, but can still play a good, solid defensive game and be so deadly and dynamic in the offensive rush, joining with the forwards and just on the power play. The Jets have a little bit of everything on that back end now, and that's the most change we've seen in this team going from last season to this season. Last season, the defense was stale. It was boring. There wasn't really much to get you excited about. Tucker Pullman, Nathan Beaulieu playing in that top pairing is not what you want to see when you're trying to win a Stanley Cup. It's not, I don't care what anyone says. Those guys may be in a bottom pairing role or what you want, but not when you're trying to win. When I look at the Jets' defensive core now, it is a team that's at a core that screams winning now, and I really, really think that they have a good chance there. Moving to the offense and that forward core, it's still deadly as it's always been, but there are questions about it now going into the season. And the big one that I still have, the number one question that consumes my mind when I think about the Winnipeg Jets and the offensive forwards that they have, and only as a whole the top six, is Blake Wheeler. I really think that Blake Wheeler is the key element to the Jets' success this season, and I will explain why. I don't think Blake Wheeler is going to have a 100-point season, and that's not what I mean by key to success. But the key to really finding that successful balance of being a deadly potent offense and utilizing the best talent that you can in the best spot is moving Blake Wheeler off of that top line. Blake Wheeler should not play with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele. I don't care what anybody says. It makes zero sense. That line has been one of the worst defensive lines in hockey for the last couple of years. Blake Wheeler has only gotten worse with his age going up, and that's not any knock on him, because he still plays pretty damn good hockey. But just because he's not a 91-point producer anymore doesn't mean that you have to say he's bad, because he's not. But with age, you start to decline in skill, and especially in speed, and that is where we have seen Blake Wheeler fall off a cliff the last couple of years. When you've got guys like Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor that are almost as fast as Nikolai Ehlers, you can make that argument for with how good they are at moving that puck at a high speed. You just get slowed down when you have a guy like Blake Wheeler anchoring that line and slowing down their potential. Blake Wheeler is the perfect type of player to play on a second line. Give him a good, bit of a slower pace line. Maybe put a Kyle Connor down there with Blake Wheeler and move up Nikolai Ehlers. Nikolai Ehlers is the key to the success of the Jets offense when it comes to actually being an offensive producer. I think Nikolai Ehlers could have 40 goals this year. I genuinely think that, especially if he found the right chemistry within Mark Scheifele. Not to mention the fact that Pierre-Luc Dubois, even though I have been excruciatingly hard on him, for good reason in my opinion, I still don't think he's going to have 30 points this year. I see people saying, oh, Blake, Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to have a down year still and all this, and I don't know how you could say that. If Pierre-Luc Dubois even is mediocre on the Jets this year in a full season, there's no way he doesn't get at least 40-plus points, in my opinion, playing within a deadly top six. Not to mention the fact that Paul Stastny is back on a one-year deal, and just because he's older doesn't mean that you have to automatically write him off. If he doesn't succeed in the top six, just like how Blake Wheeler might stumble around in there with the speed element, you can move him down and play him and plug him in anywhere. And that's something that the Jets have so much of in their forward core this year, is guys that can play anywhere in the lineup and be successful. And that's something a lot of teams don't necessarily have within their top-tier talent. But I really could make the argument that the Jets have one of the most versatile top sixes because any of those guys can play anywhere, in my opinion, but we just don't see that with Paul Maurice. And that boils down to the last big thing going into this season that hasn't changed, is coaching staff. I wanted to see Paul Maurice fired, and I still do. Am I going to write him off completely? Absolutely not. There's no way I would do that. But I will say one thing, and I hope you guys can agree with this and see why this makes the perfect amount of sense. There is nothing stopping the Winnipeg Jets this year from being a good team. There are no excuses. There is no more the blue line is weak. There's no more Patrick Laine or no more second line center. There's no more of any of that. The only argument you can make that the Jets have this year for a weakness is backup goaltending, but when you have a Vezina perennial, I can't even talk. The point is when you have a Vezina candidate as good as Connor Hellebuyck every year, perennial Vezina candidate, that's the word I was looking for, you don't necessarily need an elite backup goaltender. Is Eric Comrie still a good option? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that Connor Hellebuyck and Eric Comrie are going to be a bad tandem. We don't know that yet. We need to really see how Eric Comrie can handle the NHL workload, and we also need to see how many games Connor Hellebuyck can play and sustain this high level of play he has. The only question mark when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets failing and succeeding is if Paul Maurice will utilize this roster to its best potential. If the Winnipeg Jets stumble out of the gate for the first 10 to, I would say, 20 games, Paul Maurice needs to be fired. You can't wait until the All-Star break if you're stumbling around and not trying to maintain a grip over the top three within that Central Division, because the Central Division is going to be tough this year. You've got a team like Chicago coming up, a young team that could surprise. Minnesota was great last year, and I think they're only going to get better. Colorado's Colorado. St. Louis could have a bounce-back year if they can get some better performances from some of their veteran players, like a Tarasenko if he gets healthy and actually plays for them. There are so many variables within the Central this year that the Jets need to be able to maintain a dominant force within that top three position and try to get there. I don't want to see the Jets fighting for a wild card this year, not with the talent that they have, because they're better than that. Are they better than the Avs? I don't know. But that doesn't mean that they can't maintain top three within the Central Division. I genuinely believe that. But the problem is Paul Maurice. If Paul Maurice fails to utilize his team's potential going into the start of the season and stumbles out of the gate, he needs to be let go. The organization needs to see that this is an all-in year. You traded all those assets to bring in defensemen. You were able to go out and sign all the way to the cap. Let me remind you, this is the first time the Jets have ever been up against the cap in 10 years in trying to win now. And if you stumble out of the gate because of bad lineup combinations and, more importantly, not changing things that aren't working, which is Paul Maurice's specialty, rolling out the same crap over and over again. Like I said last year, the definition of insanity. If we see that tendency to come back and haunt the Jets at the start of the season, that's when you need to make the coaching change. And if that doesn't happen, you can roll with Paul Maurice. I genuinely mean that. But if they stumble and they cannot succeed with the roster that they have now, there's no more excuses. This isn't down to player personnel. This isn't for that. It's coaching. It has to be at that point, especially when you address every single thing that was wrong with the team last year, and then you go into this season and keep the same coaching staff. If they stumble, that's on them. Everything else that you could have done to improve the Jets instead of arguing maybe bringing in a Crosby or McDavid has been done for this team. Chevy had a great offseason. He brought in so much talent and was more importantly able to retain talent that was going into unrestricted and restricted free agency. Bringing back Neil Pionk on a great contract, getting Andrew Kopp on that one-year deal, re-signing Paul Stastny. These are things that you have to do to be able to maintain success and win at the NHL level, and the Jets and Cheveldayoff and his crew did that in the offseason. The only thing standing in the way of the Winnipeg Jets succeeding is the coaching staff, because it was the only thing we saw no change in. The Jets stumble, Paul has to go. So going into this season, my thoughts on it, honestly, as a fan, I think this is their year. I think this is the strongest roster we've seen since the Western Conference Final run. Our top six is almost the same, even though they are a little bit older, but that doesn't mean that they're still not the same type of deadly team that they were. You have a lot of wild cards this year. A Cole Perfetti potentially could somehow surprise if he gets a chance to play with this team at some point. Your defense is dynamic. Logan Stanley could even grow more and become a better player, hopefully. If he doesn't, Ville Heinola, the list goes on. Dylan DeMello is back. You didn't lose him in expansion. You have so many good variables this season going into. The Jets, in my opinion, are in a prime position to win, and I cannot wait for this season. I'm so excited, and that's really all I have left to say. I think that this team is strong. Do I have questions about this team still? Absolutely, but I feel like almost every fan of any team in any sport will always have questions and concern going into a season, especially when there are so many questions about trying to win now, because this is their Jets' best option. But will we see that? How will the coaching handle it? How will the lines look? That's all on Paul Maurice and his staff. If they fail, they need to go. The Jets have done everything else to improve this team. That is the last straw, I think, for that coaching staff. If they can't win with this, then I don't think they should still warrant praise and warrant a job anymore. But let me know your thoughts, because I'm just one person sharing his thoughts online. It doesn't matter. If you listen to this whole video, I applaud you for having the patience to be able to understand and listen to another fan, and please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe regardless of the team that you root for. As you can tell, I'm a crazy Jets fan, but that doesn't mean I don't love all other 31 teams in the NHL. If you want to see a different fan's perspective from time to time, please consider dropping a subscription. It really does help this channel out. Thank you to every single person who's been with me in this awesome journey that I call Peg City Hockey, because I never expected this channel to get to this point. I state that all the time, and I'm very grateful for all the support, likes, clicks, comments, and every interaction I've had with any one of you viewers out there. This is going to be a great season. You guys already know I'll be covering every game, even if it's not the day, moments after, or whenever it comes out. Every game will be covered. There'll be tons of Jets content and other content rolling out throughout the season. It's going to be a great year of hockey that fans are allowed back finally. Get hyped, Jets fans. This is our year. It's our time. And now it's time to come out of the shadows and show the league how passionate we really are and make that run to the first ever appearance from the Winnipeg Jets to a Stanley Cup final. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace, love, and positivity to all you beautiful people out there in the world. And more importantly, Go Jets, go.